I mean, I think it's so connected to our economic system. So in terms of just like people being really focused on taking care of me, you know, like, and I think that extends often to people's nuclear family. So like, I got to take care of my own, right? Or people say like, you're in it on your own. So there's lots of these, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Like, why don't you have someone else pull you up? Maybe
or is it even possible? I mean, if you think about it, is it possible to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps? It is physically impossible, but that's what we always keep talking about.
Because it's interesting when you said, you know, that you're a part of this broader whole, but I think for a lot of white people, they cannot tell that they're a part of a broader whole.
I don't think they have to.
There's not.
They've never had to.
Right.
And that's a part of the privilege that goes along with it. Until you have to be in a collective and know you're in the collective,
right,
or else you can't function. If you don't have to, then that's, in certain people's mind, that's a gift. I just call it privilege.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have to recognize it, and I won't. The dominant culture has a belief that people are individuals, and thus to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? And so if you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you become them or the other, okay? Because I can certainly pull myself up by my bootstraps. So look, I am independent. I am an independent organism who can survive.
Yep.
That's the dominant culture belief. And so then when I see you as that person that can't pull yourself up by the bootstrap, I can make you then an other.
Yep.
And I can marginalize everything that goes on with you because you don't have the ability to do this, therefore you're less than. Which then falls into this place where we can classify people and make them less than human.
Yep.
And then whatever we do to them is okay.
Right.
And that is the basis of the systemic racism and the other pieces that we see, the whole institutionalization.
Like you come to have this conversation with us about collaboration. And I know you've told me you see this all over the place, where you're working with people and you're like, why are these people over here working on this? And these people over here are working on this, and nobody is talking to each other. To me, that is part of the individualism mental model. Like it's individual organizations maybe it's not like just one person, but it's where instead of seeing the value in working collectively, we want the value to just be for us or for our organization.
Right, and that's the individual again, as you said. And so how do we begin to bring them together and frame them as one, as opposed to three individual siloed things?
Systemic racism is a systemic issue. It means you have to actually look at the complexity of the whole system. So I was just talking to some people about health equity and this idea of like health in all policies, right? And they're saying, well, the people of the transportation department are like, we don't do health, we do transportation. And I get that, but it's like, in some ways it's like, well, the health people need to be thinking about transportation and the transportation people need to be thinking about health. Like, and I think we've built our whole culture and our whole approach to making our world function based on like these separations and on this individual thinking of like, this is an individual problem and we're gonna have like our solution is just gonna be this piece. And so I just don't know that we can address systemic racism or any systemic issue in this current structure. I think for me, one of the antidotes has been in my own community with white people to ask like, at what cost? So you're gonna pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and what does that actually mean for your quality of life? And what does that actually mean for what your life is like when things get hard? Or, I just think developing relationships. I mean, I think again and again about the fact that we live in a really segregated world. Like most, and particularly right here in Minnesota, like a lot of white people don't know any people of color. They don't have any real relationships with people of color. And I'm like, there's just so many things about the world that you can't really understand if you're only seeing things through the lens of your community and like the lived experience of people really similar to you. So I also think there's something about just helping people think about getting out of their comfort zone and being in relationships.
Part of the way to deal with this for me is to figure out how do I get people in that space who do have a divergent ideas of what the world is, and see if there's a way for us to just have the dialogue so that we can see each other as human beings, to share the stories that absolutely build the relationships, that give us a little bit more humility around this. Because the longer we stay tangled in this web, the more difficult it is to figure out how we're actually going to do this work.